A 12-year-old boy goes through a terrible accident that causes him brain death. Will his parents be able to disconnect him to donate his heart? What would happen if they did? This story begins with Eric, a boy who would like to share more time with his father, but that is not possible because his work takes up a lot of his time. He is working on his church expansion project. On the other hand, we have Michelle, a young woman with singing skills, who is pressured by her father to launch her first production as a singer, since he sees her as the solution to his economic problems. And in a restaurant is Maria's mother, who is the owner of the place. She scolds her daughter because she has a bad habit of texting with her cell phone while she is driving, which is very dangerous. They can see that each of them has a very different life from the other. What path awaits these people, and what do they have to do with each other? While the church carries out its daily activities, at John's house, his daughter complains about the continuous headaches that she has been having lately, despite that she decides to continue in the trial, since on this day she will be hired for her first musical production. At the end of the audition, Michelle suddenly falls to the ground before the stunned gaze of everyone present. Meanwhile, Eric, when delivering a collectible doll to his father to repair it, makes him promise to take it to school in the morning, but his father does not keep his promise as usual, for reasons of work. Michelle's parents, concerned about their daughter's health, take her to the best doctors, one of whom later makes an appointment to give them the harsh news that their daughter suffers from a congenital heart defect, which prevents oxygen from circulating everywhere. The areas of your body, that is. Michelle's heart is not pumping enough, and if she does not receive a heart transplant as quickly as possible, she will lose her life. Sadly, the father gets annoyed with the doctor because he doesn't believe it, and he thinks there must be another solution and another opinion. At David's work, the project partner tells him that he has been appointed a supervisor named Lisa, and he must meet with her. So she is going to have to leave Eric waiting again, since she cannot accompany him to the basketball game, as she had promised. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Michelle's father is still upset and insists on looking for another specialist to diagnose his daughter. His wife, seeing his attitude, tells him to stop.
I've had enough.
Since his daughter is in the hands of Dr. Murr, the most eminent in all the country. Now what they need is a donor as soon as possible. Michelle's mother wonders if it's wrong to pray for a heart, since it means that someone loses their life to save her, but indolent John does not care about that. He only cares about getting a heart for her daughter, wherever she comes from. On the other hand, David, very distraught, tries to end the meeting with Lisa as soon as possible to go look for Eric, but since Eric was late and cannot communicate with his father, he leaves sad and disappointed. That's when the unexpected happens, since Maria is texting as usual on the highway, and later on Eric is about to cross the street. Eric is distracted when a call from his father comes in to tell him to wait for him, since Lisa understood how important it was for David to accompany him to the game. In that he crosses the street, just when Maria is distracted, causing a fatal accident. When his parents find out what happened, they immediately go to the hospital, where the doctor, very sorry for them because of how difficult it is to give news like this, tells his relatives that Eric has cerebral edema, that he has not had brain activity in the last few hours, and although his heart is pounding, Eric has an irreversible injury and may not recover again. His father is stunned and cannot believe it. Her mother cries inconsolably and hugs her husband, since it is not easy for her to know that she will never have her son back. Maria is put in prison and Michelle lies in a hospital bed waiting for a donor. These three families have had to go through different and very heartbreaking experiences, almost at the same time. The following week, some representatives of the local center for organ donors show up at the hospital to ask Eric's parents the possibility of donating their son's organs. Although the mother listened to them, the father and brother flatly refused.
No one is touching me.
So they begin to argue among themselves, and David begins to doubt the works of God, but Teresa cannot accept that he could doubt his faith and tells him so. adding that someone somewhere needs the help they can toast with your son's organs and you have to let him go. Teresa's goodness and her faith in God make her realistic despite the pain she feels at not being able to do anything for her son, while David's pain does not allow him to take refuge in the only one who can strengthen him in these circumstances, and now he is trying to away from God, and does not accept the donation procedure. Maria, she is sent to pre-trial detention, and there she will await her trial. While the very afflicted mother silently prays for her daughter to accept Jesus and reflect on her life. At the hospital, Eric's father tries to get a reaction from his son, but without having any answer, he prays for Eric. It is certainly very hard for his father to accept that his baby must leave this world, but he must make a decision. After some time and with the pain of his soul, David decides to sign the permission to donate his son's organs, and together with his entire family they say goodbye.
I'll see you, baby. I will see you, baby.
Minutes later, Michelle's parents are given the good news. They inform her that they have found a donor for her daughter's heart. On the way to surgery, Eric's grandfather, consolidating himself in the promises that the Lord has for his children, is proclaiming Psalm 23. Everything is ready for the transplant. And as Jesus says, "He who believes in me, even if he is dead, he will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will not die eternally." After Eric's burial, his parents are sure that God has a purpose with all this, which we will discover later. At the hospital, Michelle is recovering satisfactorily from the difficult operation she has undergone. Her mother thanks God for being good and merciful to her daughter. Then, a policeman contacts David to find out the charges to be charged against Maria, and it is there that David finds out that it was not a simple accident, but rather the imprudence of a 17-year-old teenager who had been texting while driving, and if the prosecution decides to press charges against her as an adult, she would have to spend many years in jail for manslaughter. He is surprised and confused by this news. That same day, David is appointed by his father to be in charge of a new project, and he must quickly find the contractors. At the same time, John has been fired, and the only thing that worries him is that in a month they will declare him bankrupt, without seeing the blessing that God has given his daughter to have a new and strong heart. In that his partner tells him that everything he has is for God, whatever he asks, if it is his will he will give it to him, and gives him the name of a good friend who is about to start a project. John immediately locates the project manager, who to our surprise is David. He introduces himself to John, but he arrogantly rejects him without knowing who he is really dealing with. Even so, David explains the project to him, saying that it is a very big job. He also explains the terms of the job, but since John needs the money right away, he didn't take the deal. At Michelle's house they welcome her, but she still feels very weak and sad. While Maria feels dejected and remorseful in the prison, Teresa manages to give talks to the students about the use of cell phones while driving. As a sign of acceptance, they raise their hands, which seems to be a good start for Teresa. On the other hand, since construction of the center must begin as soon as possible, David is worried. And he realizes that the only contractor available is John, so his friend tries to convince him by saying that John is a good contractor. Despite his unpleasant character, he continues saying that as men committed to God they should go the way that he gave them. Indicate, handing David John's address. So David immediately goes to John, asking him to forget what happened the other day, and they reach an agreement that will favor both parties, since they both need to start working.
Fantastic.
As John gets home, he argues with his wife because he wants his daughter to start singing, but she still doesn't have enough strength yet, so his wife insists that he at least start having compassion with his own daughter and stop thinking only about him. David goes to a restaurant to meet with Lisa. There he finds out that the young woman who took his son's life is the daughter of the owner of that restaurant, for which he is very disturbed.
What's wrong? You okay?
Arriving home for a family dinner, he tells everyone the news. His father tells him that he should do what any Christian does, and that is pray for them. Of course, David did not like that at all. He could never pray for the people responsible for his son's death, so his father he advises him to recover his faith because he has a lot of hatred. He has to change, ask God for forgiveness and seek his word. There is his essence. David is very confused, but he must accept despite the pain that God has a plan for each one of us.
Go to the Lord, son.
So David accepts the correction and very obediently asks God for forgiveness, and kneels next to Eric's bed asking God to show him his glory.
Can you say in your word?
Also, he apologizes to her wife for how badly he treated her and her family, since God showed him what he has to do, and he will do everything necessary to forgive Maria and help her. Also, he will go looking for the person who has Eric's heart. He then hugs his eldest son and regrets not having been with Eric that day, since he needed him and he failed him. John in his house feels privileged to get the job with an advance and without giving any reference in return, so his wife invites him to pray for the blessing he has been given. He thanks God for having his daughter healed from him and for having put that good man in his path. They begin the work of the project. While in the church they praise God, and in his house David and Teresa are happy to be officially organ donors. When John got the first payment from him, he hires a detective and finds out that the donor of his daughter's heart is the son of the pastor David, to his complete surprise. David and his family help Maria, hiring the best lawyer until she is released without charge. David is appointed senior pastor, and he gives a speech about his experiences with which he expresses that when what happened to his son he was filled with hatred and moved away from God instead of getting closer. Then he tells the tragic story of Maria, who is an exemplary student. He says that we must forgive her, and everyone forgives Maria, who at that moment received Christ in her heart. Pastor David unveils the new mystery, Save 1,000, with the intention of promoting this message of donating organs and tissues, and not texting while driving, to the entire world. At the end of the pastor's blessing, Teresa culminates with the ceremony by adoring, when Michelle suddenly arrives singing a song with an impressively powerful voice. At the end, Eric's family finds out that Michelle is the girl whose life he saved, donating her heart. This is the summary of a Christian movie called A Question of Faith. Click here and don't miss the next story.